Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. We're still trying to figure out what the light switches in this house work since there's so many of them, where everything's gonna go, and how we want everything set up. And one of the things I wanted to set up immediately was, of course, a new lock for the front door. And of course, we had to go to Smart Lock. So for that job, I tasked the Aqara U100 Smart Lock with securing the front door. The reason I chose this lock is because it has a host of features that I actually like and was surprised to find all in one lock. Now, it does have some drawbacks, and we'll cover that in the video. So let's go ahead and get started.
Now, you might be thinking, a smart lock, how exciting can that be? Well, let me tell you, this is one lock that I felt for some time is slept on. So Akara threw just about everything at this lock but the kitchen sink. And quite simply, they probably tried, but it wouldn't fit. First off, let's talk about the design. The Aqara U100 has a sleek, modern look that will fit right in with any smart home setup. It's compact, yet feels sturdy and well built. Installation is very similar to just about any other smart lock, with some caveats. More on that later. So far, we have the controller, the lock, the keys, batteries, a spudger tool, and in the box, the deadbolt head, mounting hardware, and a template slash guide for mounting. And that's this guy right here. You put that against the door, basically. So here's the interior part of the lock with a rubber gasket for sealing and fitment, I'm assuming. Under this little flap is where you plug the wire that links the interior portion to the lock to the exterior keypad and lock control. I do like how this key is hidden. It gives it a very sleek and stealthy look. Now for one of what I consider a drawback, this spudger isn't the strongest, and the lock does have a very precise fit when not on the door. As you can see, trying to take the cover off and it got yeeted across the room. But as I mentioned, what really sets the Aqara U100 apart is its smart features. With the Aqara app, you can control and monitor your lock from anywhere in the world if you have it connected to a bridge device. And that's one of those other caveats that I want to discuss. So now that we got just about everything out of its packaging, we can kind of look at what we have and how it should fit together. This is the head of the lock, and this is the battery compartment in the back. You have this little plate. I'm going to assume, like with the quick set, that this basically supports it to the door while you get the battery back on the back. So this will kind of go like that through the door. And then this should mate up with the back of this lock. So with that fitting in there perfectly, we know that there should be some screw holes underneath the knob of this lock. So here was where I had another issue. Again, with the flimsiness of the spudger, with it being plastic, it's basically what you use for your common cell phone. On the lock, you'll see there's a little notch under the knob. So you have to take the spudger and pry on that. And again, after the lock cover flew across the room, I wanted to be a little bit more careful. And the spudger, inevitably, the tip of it ended up, if you've used one of these, it ended up bending and breaking. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So I had to kind of pry from both sides and then kind of turn it to a position where I had some leverage. And this time I put my hand over it, you can see, in hopes that it wouldn't fly across the room. Obviously, we're still unpacking, so it was a task trying to find the battery cover. And there we go. So now with that removed, it reveals these screw holes that goes straight through the battery compartment of the lock into that metal plate, and then from the metal plate through the door, the other set of screws will go. So we'll go ahead and take this old lock off, and I have the audio turned down. You guys can see there's a lawnmower service across the street, so I didn't want all of that noise in the background while I was installing the lock. So obviously first I'm gonna go ahead and install the new deadbolt. And depending on how far inset your deadbolt is, you may have to adjust the head, which is pretty common if you've ever installed a lock. And then once we get this guy in, we're gonna go ahead and take that back plate and then the keypad, slide it through. And then you see I'm putting those two bolts through there. That secures the keypad to the door so it doesn't wobble. Then from there, you can take your battery pack and attach it to the lead that's actually hanging out of the door here. So that battery pack will just connect through that little rubber gasket to the lead right there. And then you're going to line up your screw holes through those through the locking mechanism, which I think is actually a pretty good design because the lock has to be fully secure with no play with the bolt heads for it to actually lock and unlock. So that's actually a pretty good design choice, I think, in my opinion. So we're just going to secure those screws down. Now we're ready to slap the batteries on, put everything together, and set up the lock in the app. All in all, this should only take you maybe 10 to 15 minutes if you've installed a smart lock before, maybe even less. All right, so this is what the Aqara Home app will look like once you download it on your phone. But first, I want to set this up actually in Apple HomeKit just to show you guys that you can do that without actually downloading any third-party apps, which I think on Apple's behalf is actually one of their stronger features these days. Being able to actually set up a home automation smart home setup without actually having to do multiple apps on the phone. You can do it natively in the Apple HomeKit app. Now, one thing I did learn is even though you have HomeKit installed with the lock, you still won't be able to access this lock outside of the home network without a hub, which means you'd actually have to have like a home pod or one of the new Apple TV devices, one of the newer Apple TV devices. But setup is pretty simple. You scan the QR code, it basically imports the lock, and from there you're ready to rock and roll. And you can kind of see the notification here, no remote access. To control your accessories while away from home, set up a home hub. And this just takes a minute. I think real time, it probably took like maybe 3 or 4 minutes for it to actually connect to the lock register and do all of its backend configurations. Now, this does create a secure local network. I discovered later on in my smart home setup, and we'll discuss that in a future video. But for now, just be mindful that it's not just a straight connection that's not secure. Of course, it's going to be with Apple. It's very similar to like Zigbee or Z-Wave. Now we're getting the setting up prompt, so we should be just about ready to engage with the lock. And in a few more seconds, we should be returned to the home screen. All right, now we select the lock location, and we are just going to set this up as the entrance, literally because it's the front door. And then we're going to name it front door, of course. And this does add it to your home key. So you could actually use your phone to unlock the lock by tapping it on the lock, as shown here. You can set it up to require Face ID or a passcode. Now, that does add a delay, but it is a little bit more secure just in case you do lose your phone. You don't want somebody being able to just take your phone and tap it to the lock to unlock it, especially if they've seen you do it in the past. Now, you can also set up access codes for different guests if you would like. But for now, we're just going to set up a standard access code and then skip to the actual Aqara home app setup. Okay, so now that we have that set up, we could play around with the functionality of the lock. Just from the main screen, you can tap on the lock in the lock card and lock and unlock the door. As you can see here, it's responding and then it says no response and then it should go back to active. So you can go back and forth with that, or you can actually tap on the card and show the toggle for the lock unlock itself, just to show you the different look between the two. Then you can actually go into the settings and drill down even further. You can manage access, do suggested scenes, add it to your home, add it to your favorites, get the serial and device information, and you can actually open the manufacturer app, which is the car home app, straight from this setting. So here's where things get pretty identical to Android. This is one app where I can say the visual and feel, at least to me, are very close to a one-to-one experience. So once the app installs, we go through the same process as always, agreeing to give away our data for convenience. I mean, creating an account. This time around, I'll just use my Apple ID, which is super convenient because I can skip a lot of the trivial info regurgitation. So you're just going to allow some of the basics if you're comfortable doing that, or don't allow it. Either way, you'll get into the app and just skip past some of the prompts. Allow Bluetooth, of course, so it can find the device. Then it's going to search your local network. And while it's doing that, I just wanted to scroll to see some of the other devices that Aqara offers that we may be able to add into this ecosystem. So now we're going to start the installation guide. So you have to hold the phone close to the door lock and take the battery cover off and press the set key. This will basically put it in pairing mode so that the phone can find it via Bluetooth. Then after that brief period, it'll give you a pairing code. You put the pairing code in on the phone and the two will synchronize. This reminds me of pairing headsets way back when Bluetooth first came out. So enough of that. We'll go ahead and rename the lock front door lock just like we did on the HomeKit app and basically keep that naming the same everywhere else. And of course, for the location, you can pick one of the predetermined locations or create your own quote unquote room name. So for that, we're going to also keep that similar and we're going to call that the entrance. Just hit save and assign the location and then hit next. And then from here, you can select your icon that you want to show up. You can even select whether the handle's on the left side or the right side. Now from here, just like in the Apple HomeKit app, you're going to add a user and you're going to go ahead and add the other metrics. Some people are funny about biometrics, but with what I do and what I've done in the past, I know my fingerprint's pretty much everywhere. So just like on the phone, you're going to move your finger around the fingerprint sensor enough time so they can get a full profile of your finger. Then you're just going to tell it which finger it is. And you're going to go ahead and hit done. And that is it for those two simple parts. Now you can go ahead and set the door so it can detect the locking mechanism to see how far the travel needs to be for the actual deadbolt on the lock. And then you're going to go ahead and do a door lock calibration. So basically it sets the lock to see if it's toggled to the left or the right. Basically, is it a left hand open, right hand open? Then after that, you do a door lock calibration where the deadbolt actually goes through the actual door frame so it can detect how far the lock travels into the frame. So our calibration failed, so we have to try it again. Basically, you go through those steps again. Step one, step two, and then three, you basically lock the door and unlock it, and then everything should be fine from there. And now we got the good check bar, so we go back to the main screen. And the software is pretty much the same as HomeKit, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. It's more about the hardware and the features of this lock that had me excited that we'll discuss here in just a bit. So if you wanted to add another user, you can see you have fingerprint, password, and NFC. NFC being the big feature that I'm excited for with this lock. So now we're just going to do a quick test to make sure everything works. So the fingerprint reader works. You saw the flashing lights, which means we're good. Now we're going to test the key just to make sure the travel works in both directions. That's lock. That's unlock. And we should be good to go. So remember I kept throwing that word caveat out there. Caveat, caveat, caveat. Well, to fully take advantage of this smart lock, you're going to have a hub. And I went ahead and picked up the Aqara Hub M2 during Amazon Prime Day just because it was a lot cheaper than going with, an Apple HomeKit product. And this was, I think, about 30 bucks. So it's an easy entry into the Aqara ecosystem without diving too deep. And this will give me the functionality of being able to use the smart lock when away from the home, like setting up or deleting users, vacation mode, etc., etc. And plus, it'll be easy if we decide to use any of the things I think are cool from Aqara that I've seen come out. We'll already have a hub in the ecosystem. But with that being said, some of the other features I want to take advantage of is like the NFC functionality of the Aqara U100. I actually want to create a smart key for my daughter since she's, becoming a little bit older and want to take an active role with some of the smart home stuff. We're going to basically set up an NFC tag in a device. I'm not going to say what it is here on the channel, but that'll basically be her key. It'll be discreet. It'll be something to give her a little bit more ownership of, being an adult, so to speak, or getting to that point. So back to the hub here. It's basically just the puck and this micro USB cable, which I'm not necessarily thrilled about that it's micro USB, but knowing that it's micro USB, we know it's only 5 volts and I can plug it straight into my NAS and not have to have another power source. And, if my NAS is offline, then some of my other smart home stuff is offline. It does have an Ethernet port on here, so we're going to go hardwired with it just to get it up and running. And that'll be just about it. We're going to go ahead and plug it up now. So I'm still getting the office set up, but in the meantime, I just set this up across from my Eero. Yes, Eero. I'll explain in a later video as like a dueling banjo setup where they can look at each other and keep each other in check. So let's get to the setup of this guy real quick. Okay, now that everything's hooked up and ready to go, you can go back into the car app, hit the plus sign, click add an accessory, and it'll begin scanning for devices over your network. Since I was hardwired, it came up pretty quickly, but we will have to hit the sync button on the front so that we can get the flashing yellow light like we see in the app. Once you get to that point, you'll go ahead and click the checkbox indicator light flashing in yellow/red, and then click next step. Once you get to that point, you'll go ahead and scan the code on the bottom if you're using a device that recognizes that, and select the location. We're just going to create a new room here and name it. I'm going to call it office. Leave it as Aqara Hub 2 M2. It is a security system, sort of. So we're going to go ahead and hit done. And then it binds the device. Once it's bound to the network and you select your location, get through the all of the different prompts, we'll go ahead and add the Aqara U100 Smart Lock to it. That's what's going to give you the functionality to be able to access your lock away from the home and any of the other Aqara devices that you add into this ecosystem. Now, that's not super duper important, which is why I wanted to go with a cheaper hub for this solution. Because what we're going to do in the future, and I don't want to spoil it, we're going to bring a lot of devices into a singular ecosystem, including our security panel and a couple of other not so common things that you would bring into a system. So now we're binding it to the door lock. And once that's done, like I mentioned, we should be good to go moving forward with accessing this U100 outside of the home network.
All right, everybody. Hopefully you liked this video and enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favor and make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notifications and you see content as I produce it. See you guys on the next one. Later.